Hey everyone, I'm back. All right, so today we're going to make the Pemberley Pullover by Peekaboo Pattern Shop. Say that 5 times fast. All right, so I am going to use this panel. I literally just found this when looking through my fabric. I did not realize I had it, and I like it. So I decided to use this for my front. Hopefully it works out with the cut of the hoodie. It is basically like a crisscross bottom. So yeah, I'm hoping with the shape of the pattern piece that this panel works. We'll see. And then I have the coordinating yardage here. I don't know why I have 2 pieces. Don't ask me. And actually, this piece kind of looks like slightly different coloring, but I think that'll be fine still. I'm pretty sure I got these all at Ash and Elm. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure. And actually, now that I'm looking at it, the panel looks more gray and the yardage looks more green. There are spots of green over here. Okay, it doesn't matter. Anyway, for the bands and cuffs and things like that, I'm going to use this cotton lycra, dark gray. I don't know where I got it. I don't think you care. And yeah, so I think that's probably it. If you want to see me sew it up, stick around. Okay, so this pattern doesn't have a formal page showing the options. The only options are a funnel neck or a crew neck with a neckband. And then there's also an optional kangaroo pocket. So this is a picture of the funnel neck option. And then the pink one here on the right is a picture of the version with the crew neckband. All right, here are our pieces. We have our front piece, our back piece. We have 2 sleeves. We have a crossover piece. This is the funnel neck. That's the option I chose. We have 2 cuffs and the bottom band. Now, if you're doing size extra small through large, you're just going to have 1 band piece. If you're doing size XL and up, you're going to have 2 band pieces. So I have 2 band pieces here. They're basically just going to be sewn together. And I did forget to mention in the intro, but I will link chapters below in the description. So if you want to skip to any particular part of the tutorial, you can go ahead and do that. They'll all be time-stamped for you. All right, so step 1, we're going to go ahead and take our bodice pieces and sew our shoulder seams together. So right sides together. The seam allowance for this pattern is a 1/2 inch. Just go ahead and line up your shoulder seams, pin them in place, and then sew with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Here we have our shoulder seams sewn. Next step is to place in our sleeves. Now the sleeves are cut on the fold, so there really is no front and back. They are interchangeable. Just make sure that you're doing right sides together. Match your center of your sleeve to your shoulder seam, and then ease in the rest of the sleeve all along the arm side. Once you have your sleeve pinned in, it's going to look like this. Just go ahead and sew that up with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then repeat that with the other sleeve. All right, we have our sleeve sewn in. Now take it and place the bodices right side together. You're going to do your side seam. You're only going to do this side though, the right side, if it's up facing you. This side with the piece missing down here, you're going to leave that alone. So pin up your sleeve and your side seam and then sew that at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, that's done. Again, you should only have one sleeve and side seam sewn. Now you're gonna get your crossover piece and you're gonna line it up here on the bottom. And you're going to sew it only 1.5 inches up, starting at the bottom hem. So what I'm gonna do is just make a marking that's up 1.5 inches, just so I know where to stop, and that's about right here. So you're only sewing from the bottom up 1.5 inches, and I believe it says to do that with your sewing machine. Go ahead and do that, and then we'll be right back. Okay, I was wrong. It did not say to sew it with your sewing machine. I made that up, I guess. But I did that anyway because when you're stopping in the middle of a seam like this, it's just so much easier to get a clean finish with a sewing machine versus a serger. So if you can see that, again, 1/2 inch seam allowance, only up 1.5 inches, just to my marking there. The next step, if you're using sizes XL and up, you have 2 band pieces. So you're just gonna sew these strips together. So take one, take the other, put the short ends right sides together, and then sew that up with a 1/2 inch seam allowance to make one long strip. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'm also gonna press these just to make them a little bit flatter. All right. So I have my band, I sewed the 2 pieces together. I also pressed it, and then I pressed it in half as well because it is a band. It does need to be pressed in half. And now we're going to attach it. So we're gonna pin it to the bottom here, and it says to leave a 2-inch tail on this side. So from this point, you're gonna extend that an additional 2 inches with the band. It also says line up the band seam with the left side seam. So here's my side seam, and my band seam is here. So I'm gonna line that up. And that's for sizes XL and up, to line up that seam. If you're doing anything smaller than an XL, you're not going to have a seam in your band. Okay, so let's see. If I line it up like that, that's going to be a lot more than 2 inches. Okay. So it's looks like it's going to extend a lot more than 2 inches past the crossover piece if I line up my side seams. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave just the 2 inches like the tutorial says. Should be about here. Okay, and I'm just going to pin this all the way around to the bottom, and then if I have excess left over, I could deal with it after it's sewn on maybe. I don't think I cut the band incorrectly, so I'm wondering why I have all this extra band. It doesn't look like I should have any extra according to the next step, but maybe I'm misreading it. So yeah, I pinned this onto the crossover piece. I left an extra 2 inches extending out, and I'm just going to continue to pin this all the way around to the rest of the bottom of the garment. All right, so just to show you what that looks when it's pinned on here, again, I left a 2-inch tail. Now I did not line up the band seam with the side seam as it says, because then I would have a lot of excess. So not sure what that's about, but I'm sure it'll work out fine. I do have quite a bit of excess on this side, so again, not really too sure. Can you tell I don't read the tutorial ahead of time? I just go for it. So we will see what this is about. I'm guessing I might have to trim that off. We'll see. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and sew this on with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. All right, so that's sewn on. And what I did was I just extended the 2-inch seam allowance, or 2-inch, the 1/2 inch, excuse me, seam allowance on the entire band piece. So, you know, I cut off the same amount here on the band as I did when sewing it to the actual bodice. So the next step is to press this down now. If you want, you can press your seam allowance up. Also, when I sewed the band on here, I did open that seam allowance just to reduce a little bit of the bulk there. And you're going to trim now this extra band piece, continuing the angle of the crossover. So don't trim it straight, not like that. You're going to continue the angle. So I'm going to flip this around so it's easier for me. And just going to go ahead and trim it just like that. So it looks like this. Next step is to top stitch the entire thing along the crossover in the back. So here's our crossover piece, so you're going to top stitch here and then continue it all along the back, and then it says to stop once you reach the front. So here's my front. So as soon as I get to this side seam, I'm going to stop with the top stitching. All right. So I went ahead and top stitched that again, only till I got to the front. Now it says to arrange it right sides together so that the front and back are touching, and then lay the crossover piece like this. Okay, so it says the top edge of the crossover piece should cover the seam allowance on the band of the front piece. So like this, it should cover the seam allowance like this. And the entire rest of the crossover piece should cover the seam allowance like this. Okay, double check that the intersection right here is at the center front, which it is. Okay, and then it says secure with pins, wash away wonder tape, or a glue stick. Let me grab my tape here. Perfect time to use the wash away wonder tape. And again, I'm not trimming this yet because I haven't read the next step yet. I don't read ahead. So I'm guessing that I'm probably just gonna trim it, but I'm not gonna do that yet, just in case. So I'm gonna apply some of this wonder tape all the way here. Stop when I get to the side seam. Make sure it's on there really good. Then go ahead and start matching this up. Have to rip that off because I have extra over here. So I think I'm gonna start from the side. And I need a little bit more tape. It would be nice if I like prepared more for these videos, but as I said, I just go for it. But But in a way that might be good, because then you can see me kind of work through these things just like you would if it was the first time you were sewing this pattern. Okay, so there we go. So we have that all stuck down, and then you're just going to finish the top stitching. So continue right where you left off and then go ahead and finish the front. It says as you top stitch, you'll be sewing through the front piece, the band seam allowance, and the top edge of the crossover, which was basted in place in step 10. So basically you're going to, here's where my top stitching ended. So as I continue around, I'm going up this part, up this seam allowance to top stitch it, which is going to secure this crossover piece in place, and also, you know, also finish the top stitching. Okay. All right, so here is what it looks like after that top stitching has been done. Okay, so you have your crossover here. Hold on. Okay, yeah, here's my excess. So I am going to go ahead and cut this excess off because the next step is to finish this side seam. So just snipping that right off. Okay, but it looks nice. I'm gonna, once I'm done with this, give this a good press, a tiny bit of waviness, but if you use wash away wonder tape, that will also help with that because it'll stabilize it a little bit. So as I said, next step, right sides together, we're gonna finish this side seam, and after you sew the side seam, she does recommend that you try it on, because if you want to slim it down a little bit, then this is the time to do that. So pin and sew your sleeve and side seam together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so we have that other side seam sewn. A couple things I want to show you. So the tutorial says after you sew the side seam to try it on, like I said, and if you want a narrower fit, you know, make your adjustments now. I had to do that because it kind of like ballooned out at the bottom. I almost always grade a smaller size on the top to a larger size on the bottom because I'm smaller up top in the chest than my waist and my hips. But this time I didn't need it. So if I ever make this again, I'll just use the smaller size. So I did have to kind of adjust my side seams, but here's what happened. I should have done it on the sewing machine because I made a little bit of a mess on the serger. It actually created a hole. So what I did is I went back with the sewing machine and just sewed straight down. But because we had already attached the band, it makes a pucker. So what I'm going to do to fix that is I'm just going to go with my sewing machine and continue that seam just all the way down the band, and then there will just be a seam in the band, which is completely fine. It's the side seam anyway. And then the same thing on this side. Okay, that way it'll get rid of that pucker, but it'll fit better, which I'd rather. Okay, one other thing I want to show you is I realized that I didn't completely catch this angle piece in my top stitching, so I went back and stitched over it again. I still didn't completely catch it, but at least it's tacked down now, so that will be fine. Before it wasn't stitched down at all, so you just want to go through and make sure that that was caught in your top stitching. Okay, so next we're going to do our cuffs. I did go ahead and pre-press my cuffs in half like I always do. So you're just going to take these right sides together and then sew down each of these sides with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, once you've sewn your cuffs, You're going to fold them in half. Make sure the raw edges match. And then attach it to your sleeve. Okay, so just half the cuff, half the sleeve, match up your half points and sew those on. All right. So we have our cuff sewn on. Last step is the funnel neck. So we're going to take our piece, right sides together, and sew this one long edge with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, we have that sewn. Then you're going to fold it in half, just like a cuff. So I should have pressed it, but I didn't. That's okay. Match up your raw edges. And you're going to just slip it over the neck and sew it on. Really easy. I'm going to quarter mine so that if I have to stretch it, that I don't overstretch it anywhere. And the tutorial does have instructions for if you want to do eyelets and a drawstring in this. I'm just skipping that. This French terry is actually pretty thin, so it's almost more like a shirt than a pullover. So I think I'll probably just wear it with like maybe a tank top underneath or something, because it's not going to be warm enough to wear as like outerwear. Okay, let me quarter my neckline here. And then all you're going to do is slip it over your neckline, match up those quarter points, and then sew it on with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. All right, we're all finished. There's what it looks like. I did go ahead and give this bottom part a good press with steam. It did flatten it out nicely. All that's left is for me to finish my threads with some fray check and I'll be done. I do want to show you what the side seams look like now that I adjusted those. They look much better. Here's what that looks like on the inside. All I did was sew down with my sewing machine and then I just cut off that excess that was sticking out. Okay, so looks completely finished. Here's the other side. And that's it. Thanks so much for sewing along with me. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you'd like me to sew up next. And as always, thank you for watching.